Welcome to Decoding Growth, where unfiltered conversations and bold ideas are reshaping retirement. Each episode cuts through the noise to reveal the strategies and unexpected alliances driving real industry change, one conversation at a time. Here are your hosts, Lisa Kottler and Will Prest.
Welcome to another episode of Decoding Growth. I'm Lisa Kottler. I'm here with Will Prest. And Will, it's interesting. When you and I decided that we wanted to even do this podcast, and we really started talking about, what does that look like? Why would we do it? What do we want to talk about? And we thought about some of the early guests that we wanted to have. We talked about how important it would be to have people that really challenge the status quo, who challenge the industry. I mean, for all the right reasons, because we want to improve it. And I think you even said something like, yeah, we need folks who are also willing to ask the tough questions, right?
Exactly. So maybe we'll ask some tough questions, but we're lucky enough to have like a real insider, someone that's been in the business, commenting on the business, speaking on the business. So we're really excited.
And you can add for a long time. And then
if you're going to have someone who's challenging the status quo, of course you're going to ask Nevin Adams to be on the show. And we could not be more excited. Known Nevin a long, long time. I think I first knew of you back in your plan sponsor days with all your writings and things back then, and have always respected and appreciated your insights. And you really come at this industry, you know it inside and out from every angle and every perspective. So couldn't be more excited to have you here.
Well, I get that mostly from hanging out with smart people like you guys. So I appreciate the opportunity to come and hang out with you all again. So thank you.
Yeah, we're fired up. It's kind of like you were an athlete, and now you're you're the industry commentator, but you commentate because you know the game, right? And you're an insider, so and an outsider. And what's interesting is I think you've tried to leave the industry, but you're still here.
I'm like a certain other famous major league player who bet on the game. But I won, and I bet on my team.
And you'll get in the Hall of Fame, although he didn't. So
not yet.
So I wanted to kick it off with a real meaty question, and here's what it is. You cannot go to a conference. You cannot go to a roundtable. You can't even go to an internal meeting in our industry without having 2 or 3 lawyers and talking about ERISA. And I wonder what your perspective is in terms of how that helps the industry, because it's super important to how we're structured. But what are the impacts in terms of maybe where it holds us back, or how it kind of trains our focus on so much around the regulation and less about sort of how are we making it better and how are we helping the employee, the end user, really benefit and do the best they can when they get to retirement?
That's a fair point. And I've heard that come up a lot.
And at the tail wagging the dog, it feels like.
We're kind of running along a spectrum. There's a pendulum in life in all things, and it tends to go one way and then another. And I think for a long time, our industry was concerned, rightfully, that the people who literally were on the line for the fiduciary duties of the plan sponsor, didn't have any real appreciation for what that meant. Didn't understand the personal liability that went along with that for those decisions. Didn't understand how, the standards, the so-called prudent man standard, how that was supposed to be applied. And so I think in response to that, we really came at it hard. We really tried to sort of help people understand and appreciate what that meant. And some of that was coming out of the mouths of people like retirement plan advisors, who wanted the plan sponsor to appreciate what they were bringing to the table. And sometimes, when all somebody wants to know is what time is it, we want to first explain to them the intricacies of the pocket watch so that they can fully appreciate our ability to read and interpret and apply it. So, there's been a lot of that. And look, I'm an attorney. I'm very into this, and I very much along my path have wanted to make sure that plan sponsors did understand and appreciate what that meant. And I would also agree that today, maybe always, there's been a certain hesitancy on the part of people who do appreciate those risks to take that first step. The joke I always remind people of is, we've all seen the National Geographic special where the wildebeest who wanders away from the herd gets taken down by the lion. And I think, you can be a prudent, responsible plan sponsor, be cognizant of that metaphor, and say, I don't want to be that. I don't want to be that one. Let 2 or 3 of them get out there, and then I'll go join the rest of the herd, kind of thing. And there has been a certain, that's a human tendency. That's not just a fiduciary and ERISA thing. But I do think there have been things, you see it now in things like retirement income. You see everybody says everybody wants to know about it. Nobody's doing anything about it. I don't doubt for a second that people's concerns about the fiduciary aspect play a factor in that. Personally, I suspect a lot more of it has to do with, I don't understand how this is actually going to work. And so they're curious, but they're not ready to be the guinea pig. And I think that's in all things. I think people hesitate to be first. Some people hesitate to be first. People like you all don't mind being first, but there's a lot more of the other kind than there are of you all. And so I think, yes, I think some of that, the short answer to your question, Will, is I think some of that has played a role, and I think it continues to play a role. But I'm not thinking it's necessarily a bad thing, because our industry has a tendency to get a little over the top of its skis with regard to promising what certain things could deliver, knowing that they will one day deliver them, but also knowing that they're not quite ready to be that yet. Ultimately saying the only way we're going to get there is if we get some people on board and trying this out. But then finding that guinea pig, that always ends up being a challenge.
Well, look, I certainly respect it because we are probably one of the most highly regulated industries, right? More than the rest of financial services, because in addition to SEC and FINRA, we also have DOL and IRS, and we're talking about people's money, and often it's the largest account. In some cases, it's the only account that they have. So I certainly respect that and get all that, um, but it does feel like it sort of can impede progress sometimes. And so how do you find that balance? And I think we're seeing that now too with AI specifically. Will and I have experienced lately quite a bit where we've been in front of a variety of groups talking about our retired tech map and the trends that we published. And we've been in front of client services groups. We've been in front of advisors. We've been in front.
And I'll just editorialize here and say, cool stuff, by the way, and much needed. And honestly, from a guy who has had struggled to keep up with all of it, much appreciated.
Oh, thank you. Well, it was really just kind of a passion project. We knew we were interested in it, and it's been the response has been incredible, which was really why we started this podcast. Is it seemed to spark a conversation, and we wanted to continue that for sure. So it's been incredible. But as we've been out talking about it in front of a variety of these groups, one thing that keeps coming back is, like, as I said, specific to AI as an example, we love it. We want to use it. Our company has even offered us, whether it's Copilot or some other opportunities, but legal pushes back. And look, I totally can understand it, but how do we start to, find those innovators? You call them the guinea pigs, but how do we find those folks, and how do we really move forward? Because if we don't progress, I think we're going to find ourselves in a really tough spot.
My favorite bosses of all time, and I've had some really good ones. I've had a couple of duds, but he said to me once, "Never let your lawyers run your business." And I think, and went to law school. Still, I understand the mindset, and it is a mindset. And the reality is that the legal profession is sort of inherently driven towards being conservative and to being risk averse. That's why you hire them. But that's the opinion you take in. But if they're setting your guiding star, then you're not going to be, you're going to be slower. You're going to be held back. You're not going to be making the market. So that's just kind of part of it. I think the problem, if you will, with something like AI is not only that it's new, because it's not all that new anymore, but it's evolving. Like, as we speak, AI is evolving. And it's the same comment I've had when people get talking about things like cryptocurrency or the current interest in bringing private markets into the DC space. Some of these things have been around a while, but it's not the same thing that it was 5 or 10 years ago. Now, in some cases, that means it's better, it's matured, it's evolved, it's been regulated. But in some cases, it means, yeah, it used to be that, but it's not acting like that anymore. It's doing something really different. And I haven't had time to get up to speed on it. And by the way, it's a moving target. So
Yeah.
even if I evaluate it, how do I keep current with where it's going? And I've seen that on my personal experience and exposure to AI. It's changing, and honestly, in some of the ways it's changing, it's not good. I mean, and when I say that, I think AI is can be an incredibly helpful tool. And I've heard and I accept that there's going to be so many more people needing help, particularly in the retirement business, than there are going to be people available to help them. And the only way we can close that gap is to leverage these kind of tools, certainly for people who might have less exotic needs and things like that. But you're going to need that kind of tool. But AI wants to help. And so what I've seen on some things is AI wants to help so much, it'll make stuff up. And, which is not any different than having that staff member who's, a bit of a, butt kisser who will tell you what you want to hear instead of what you need to hear kind of
Right.
thing. But I think, you've got to say, well, how are we using AI and how are we relying on it? I think as a resource, I think as a tool, I think as an accessibility thing, even a conversational thing, it's amazing, just flat out amazing what it can do. But I would say too, then just, trust but verify. And I think that's where we are with this kind of stuff. And I think the big question about AI is, what sort of guardrails have you put up around it? I mean, when you ask it a question, where is it going to find the response? And if where it's going is a good place and it's sort of bounded in and it's, you've got the guardrails, I'd argue in a lot of ways, your lawyers should be more comfortable with AI than with human beings, because human beings drift off the course all the time and make stuff up all the time and are inconsistent frequently. AI can be trained. AI can be channeled. And so you've got an opportunity, if you're a legal or compliance minded entity, to look at this and say, I want to know what those guardrails are. I want to know kind of where it's bounding it in, how is it getting its information, how it's structured. Your legal compliance department has a lot better shot of controlling AI than they do individuals. So that's what I would say to the legal folks. If you're frustrated by your inability to control human beings, well, AI will be a lot easier.
Can we take that a little bit farther? I think when you think about what you just stated as some principles, I think I think there's guardrails, and I think prompts can be used and fact checking can be used to make sure there's consistency. So let's talk about a specific area. Like financial wellness could be one where suddenly you go from, think about acetates and workbooks from 15 years ago to everybody talks about Netflix and Amazon. So it's people like you, Nevin, like shows like this. So it's kind of general personalization. But now there's tools in the financial wellness space that will keep track of your specific needs and will be able to talk to you about trigger points and instances and make it very personalized to you versus different to me. Have you seen anything there? What are your thoughts in terms of the best we can bring forward for participants?
Well, we know it's all about personalization, but the other side of this is personalization at a reasonable cost. I think as we've attempted to move towards a more personalized approach, the problem with personalization is it's more expensive, right? The more detailed it gets, the more things I have to know about you, the more I bring in. I mean, it costs money. It costs me more money to sit down with an advisor than it does to go onto a calculator online. I'm probably getting a better answer from the person, because when I'm working online, I've got to go through a specific channel. And I think that the thing that I love about the concept of AI is the ability to broaden its horizons, to not work just in a channel, and also to learn. So again, I think that's ultimately how we're going to end up delivering on a cost-effective basis a more personalized solution. I also think AI is really approachable, and again, once you get past the sort of like, who am I getting the answer from kind of thing, I think it's easier for people. Well, I'll say it this way. So let's deal with generations for a second. It's a lot easier for my kids to talk to a machine than it is to talk to a person. Okay. They don't want to talk on the phone. They'll want to text. All right. We all know this. And I think certainly that generation, but even my generation, it's just more comfortable to talk about sensitive subjects without sitting across the table from somebody. We all talk about how people want that personal touch, but I think the touchstones along the way, I think the thing that helped people better understand and appreciate what they need to know is about taking baby steps, not this one big full immersion into it. I think part of our problem is we feel like we've only got, and when I say our, I mean the industry, we feel like we got one shot at this person to give them the right answer. And we better, by God, come at them with everything we possibly can right now, because they'll never come back again. And some of that's true. People often don't come back. So it's not like it's not based in reality, but I think the better approach, particularly on a subject that's as sensitive and as potentially complicated as financial planning, certainly decumulation, things like that, it's about a series of steps that sort of help people understand and appreciate what's going on. And I think they'll be able to do that better, particularly the more familiar society gets with the uses of AI, if they can baby step with this. And we're already baby stepping. I mean, has anybody gotten on with on online chat support for your cable or your phone or what? You're already talking to AI. You're already doing this, folks. You may not think you are, but you are. And there are limitations, right? Because they've got it boxed in. And frequently I'm so boxed in, I'm like, no, let me talk to a person. But that's changing over time, and those resources are getting better. And the short answer to your question, Will, believe it or not, I have an inability to provide short answers.
No, they're just very thoughtful. That's what they are.
But I think that's going to be necessary. But I think that's the part of the incrementalization. I actually think the way human beings are going to better approach all this stuff is to take baby steps instead of the full deep plunge into the waters. They can still take the full deep plunge if they want. There'll be plenty of people out there doing that. But look at the acceptance of things like target date funds. How much interaction did that require? All people had to know really was, that was we'll make this decision for you.
Well, I think, we do have some companies on the map that are taking this personalization in a way that, to your point about being incremental and really learning who the person is. Like if you look at like People, Tiffin at Work, Financial Finesse, they're giving the ability for an employee to come on and use it like they would Chat GPT, but it has all their benefits included in there, and they can ask whatever questions they need and want. And it's going to be able to help because all those benefits are tied together. And we hear a lot about convergence, right? All these things coming together. But your ability to contribute to your 401k plan is certainly impacted by the cost of your healthcare premiums, right? And so it's all related. And we do see companies that are using software and AI, and hopefully, I think, ways, much more economical ways, back to your point about, it could be expensive for personalization. So I think they are finding some ways to do that. So hopefully we're going to see some, they're all pretty new in this. So we'll see how that plays out over time.
People really need it, though, from my standpoint. And you all know, I mean, I've been swimming in the retirement plan waters since I was in college, which obviously wasn't yesterday. And yet, the funny thing is, it has been much easier over the years for me to help give people good advice on what they should do. But when it gets applied to yourself, there's that saying about a lawyer who has himself for a client, But when it comes down to your own finances, your own situation, honestly, I wanted some backstop. I knew the right answers, but I wanted somebody to check my work. And so even the people who really sort of ostensibly know all this stuff, when it comes down to they're applying to your personal situation, I think you're going to be looking for that kind of thing. But and then I'll also say, you mentioned prompts a while ago, maybe Will did. Like in life, it's important that you ask the right questions and ask the right questions in the right way. And the better people are at asking the right questions, the better answers they're going to get. That's true in life as well as AI.
And collaborate with it and have the AI ask you questions too. That is the best. Have it as a thought partner as you would think through something, and really poke and probe and have it ask you questions and ask it, have I missed anything? Is there, or do you need to ask me any clarifying questions? I couldn't agree with you more on that.
Yeah, it's both amazing and just a little bit creepy. But yes.
But it does get to know you. So back to your point about personalization. That's where I think those kinds of companies that are thinking about it in that way on our map, or a company like Moneywell, who is using different distribution channels to communicate with employees and using behavioral finance with it. So I think we are getting much smarter in creating new business models.
I think I'll just a little quasi pitch for Moneywell. I think that's what's really cool there, because again, I think it gets back to that incrementalization. I think the amazing thing, people are scared of math, and people are scared of money and talking about money. And it's a real problem. And because if you're scared of talking about it, you're never going to get over being scared of talking about it. And it's something families have a problem, I think, still sharing that. I mean, we shared more with my kids than my parents ever thought about sharing with me. And yet to this day, I'm like, yeah, we should have talked more about that kind of thing. But it feels really personal. And so you don't even end up with conversations like, well, how much money do you make? And how much are you putting aside for retirement? And, what kind of insurance do you have? These were conversations that I wasn't having with my mother until she was getting at a point in life where, as executor of her estate, I was going to have to know this stuff. And I didn't ask her until that point because I didn't want to intrude. But it's really important, and people get so stressed about the things they don't know. And this is ultimately, and you see this time and again in surveys, the people that have taken the time to sort of try to understand some of this stuff, they feel so much better, because it's like going to, it's like a horror movie, or Jaws just had its 50th anniversary, right? They weren't able to have the shark in the movie as much as they wanted, and it was 10 times scarier because we had in our minds what that shark was and what that shark was doing.
Right.
And it's the same thing with things like finance, retirement planning. It's so much scarier in the abstract than it is if you actually had a chance to sort of get your hands around it. But again, I think, you've got to give people a chance. It's that baby steps. It's going to help them get comfortable with the concepts. That's what I love about what Moneywell's doing, because I still don't think we do enough of that in our industry, because we're still very much obsessed with I got one shot at this. Let me fire hose time. And that's what we do.
You've covered so many players and so many trends. What companies or ideas do you think are just underappreciated right now, but could make a big impact?
Well, I don't know about underappreciated. There are a lot of things out there for people to look at and chew at. And I think, we're coming into a time where it feels like there's going to be less regulatory restriction on some of this stuff. You can feel good about that, or you can feel nervous about it. But I think it's fair to say that kind of thing is coming. I do think that rolling your money over is still a problem. There are solutions out there. There have been regulatory and legislative guidance to kind of help make some of that pieces easier, but it's still harder than most people are ready for. So when most people are allowed to leave their money where it is, I think they do. And yet that can be problematic. And I can say this, I'm like a recovering rolloveraholic. Because I didn't roll my stuff over until I was done, if you will. And I didn't do it. I had rational reasons for all of that. But the bottom line was it was just complicated. I started a couple of times and got lost in the whatever. So I think helping people.
And you're an expert, by the way.
Well, that was part of the problem, along with everything else. I'm like, I'm going to be out of the market for how long? I mean, it was crazy stuff like that. So I think helping people keep up with their money is something that's really important and needs to be better thought of. The thing everybody talks about today, of course, is the retirement, the decumulation, the retirement income side of things. I would love to see us come up with better solutions on the tail end of this. I'm not an advocate of defaulting people into these solutions. I think I think retirement income is intuitively incredibly personal. Unlike a target date fund, unlike accumulation, which is all pretty much the same thing, I think retirement income is, or should be, more specialized. So I get a little leery about default. I mean, I'm not saying that can't work, but I think defaulting people into those solutions is problematic. So can we give them the option without it being a default? But again, once you ask people to make a choice, then they slow down. They don't make choices. We all know this. So I don't know how to kind of solve that. But I think anything that makes it easier for people to keep up with their finances holistically is helpful. And that gets back to some of the convergence things that you all are talking about. But the things that I'm talking about, helping people get out, helping people keep up with the stuff that they've got, there are solutions already out there that are already kind of working. I don't think some of them are working as well as people want you to believe they're working, but
There's so many things in there to tease out. One, I'll just give a little shout out here to so we have a couple on our map, a couple of companies on the Retire Tech map that do help on the rollover process. And I use one myself, Capitalized. Super easy. They took care of everything. It was fantastic, including where one of my 401k accounts required a phone call with that company before you could move it. You couldn't just do it online. And they even set up the call and then just told me when it was. They dialed in for me and then dialed me into the call. So there are companies that are thinking through where the friction is in the process and really working on that.
Did they cut you a check, or did they wire the money?
No, they wired it.
Well, good for you, because I had trouble getting my large mammoth brand name 401k companies to wire money to my account. Oh, if it was to their IRA, they would. But everybody else wanted to send me a check. Yeah, it's amazing how easy they will allow it for you to stay with their money. But everybody else wanted to cut me a check and put it in the mail.
Yeah, I think the providers throw up a lot of walls and a lot of barriers because they don't want to lose the money. But it's all sort of probably works out in the wash because they're also getting rollovers into their But but yeah, we should just make the whole process much easier. But to your points about retirement income, one of the things that Will and I talk about is there's a whole there are some first principles in innovation, and one of them is not to use jargon or slang. Nothing to do with the tech, right? I mean, of course, you want simple, intuitive tech. You want to leverage the latest modern tech and all of that. But if we could just back up for a second, speak directly to the employers and the employees, the ones who purchase and use the plans, find out what their problems are to solve, build solutions around that, and communicate to them in a way, because we say, oh, well, do you want retirement income? And they're like, well, what's retirement income? If we could speak to them in ways about, hey, we're going to help you replace your paycheck and your benefits in retirement, something very simplistic, and speak to them in those terms. So talk to us a little bit about that, about our apparent inability to really think through things and through the eyes of our target customers.
Well, I think it goes back again to what I was saying before. I think we work really hard on really complicated things to make them work. And then I think a lot of times we feel like we want people to appreciate all that hard work and what it took to pull it together. And so we want them to do that. The other thing is, we talk about it, we don't even realize it's jargon anymore.
It's true. You're right.
I mean, so it's like, I see all these surveys and it says, these surveys say, participants want retirement income. I'm like, well, heck yes. If you ask me the question, would you like, like income and retirement? How do I say no to that? I'm surprised it's not 100%. I'm surprised it's only like 90%. What's wrong with these other people here? Because I think if they would really understand what we're talking about here, I think on the one hand, they might want it. On the other hand, they might have some questions about how you're going to get to it. And I think sometimes we're trying to help people we go back and forth between over-explaining and under-explaining. And I think sometimes we short sheet it so much, which is why I think there's this big push now towards an increased use of defaults, because it's like, We know we'll never be able to explain this in a way that A, they'll understand, B, the regulators will let us explain it, or C, that we can get past our compliance department. So let's just make it happen for them and give them a chance to check out if they want, but we know they won't, kind of thing. To me, that's just lazy. I understand if we had never done that with target date funds, we wouldn't be where we are today with people in terms of their investments and their diversification and the asset allocation, and the rebalancing and all that. I think it's been incredibly valuable for that. And I think there's a fine line between trying to leverage things like behavioral finance and basically taking advantage of it. And that's where I think we just need to be thoughtful about what we're going to do for people / to people, and understand how that's going to work. I do think this industry, including me, tried for decades to try and explain all this stuff to people. It didn't work. Mostly people didn't want the education. Mostly this was just more than they had their time to deal with. We keep talking about things like, well, let's do more financial education in school and then they won't be so afraid of this. Well, I wouldn't mind that. But again, I think there's a big gap between what you learn in school and what you get to by the time you get to work. And I think that time gap and that experience gap means that a lot of that financial education in school doesn't go any further than some of the education I had in school on subjects I had no interest in. It doesn't last. So I don't think, if I had a magic answer, I'd probably, I don't know, I'd be different than I am. I don't have a magic answer. It's easier to sit here and say this isn't working than it is to actually come up with a solution for it. Right. But I wish we could do that. I wish we could find a way to sort of help people get up to speed on the basics of this. I don't need to know how to service my car anymore. In fact, I'm afraid to, because I opened up the hood of my car the other day. I couldn't even find the battery. I was like, where are they hiding it these days? It used to be like right here in front.
Exactly.
And it's not anymore. And it's under a nice plastic cover. It's like, what? But I had enough basic knowledge once upon a time that I could talk to the mechanic who did know how to do it, that I could understand what they were saying to me would be needed to do a requirement, and have some gut check of whether that made sense or not. And I didn't get that through a lot of fancy book learning, if you will, but it's just kind of a basic exposure. And I hate to keep coming back to my thing on the incrementalization, but I think I think people are afraid of this, and I think we are not doing anything to help them get over that. And I think our opportunity is through some kind of education, some kind of AI-ish supported instruction, whatever, some way of easier tools to sort of help people get comfortable with the stages here. And surely to goodness we can do that before they hit retirement.
To bring these new ideas forward in an incremental way so that the risk isn't overwhelming. Do you have any observations or advice for sort of how to bring, if you think about our Retire Tech map, it's all these new ventures trying to bring new ideas kind of to fill a niche, to solve a problem, whether it's participant engagement but they need the big brands that are already existing to kind of take that up. Do you have any advice or observations about how to get those two together?
Well, honestly, I think some of it starts with knowledge. And that's where I think the roadmap you all put together is really helpful, because it not only identifies, but it compartmentalizes these entities. Because particularly with this burst of fintech, whatever, explosion kind of thing, it's and to make matters worse, brands that are there like rebrand and come up with a new name, and you lose track. So you feel like at some point you need a family tree that says they used to be this and now they're this, and now
That's a great idea. There are some family trees.
It would be such a spider web. It would be hard to track.
I understand, but the other piece of this, I mean, to me, the map that y'all laid out, it's a little bit like, and I'll use a painful example, coming home from IKEA with your box of pieces. And if you're smart, the first thing you do is you open it up to the list of parts and you make sure you have everything.
Yes.
And also at the same time, you assure yourself that there are a few extras in here that you're not actually going to need. Why? Because if you get done with your project and you have extra parts, you worry that you've forgotten something. So yeah, and to me, grid you all put together, really the roadmap really helped. That's like the parts list to me, and like this is kind of like how all the parts are. And now the other question, and we've talked about this, is like, okay, so like how do I connect these, or which of these connect? And you all know better than probably anybody in the industry now which ones do connect with others, which ones can't yet connect with others, and which ones really need to connect with this one before you connect to this one, kind of thing. In other words, there is a map that goes with the chart, and I think the piece along that ends up saying, some sort of a better understanding of how does this piece work with this piece, work with this piece, kind of thing. I think that's when, on the one hand, I think that's when the sort of the big brands, if you will, to your point, like they sort of more get it. But I would say the other thing is, I think a lot of these big brands want to be the big brand, and there's a certain reluctance. Therefore, it's like if I can't buy this or assimilate this, I'm not going to use this. And there are exceptions, but that I think that's still kind of a natural human characteristic on this stuff. I find that most institutions that are big and successful want to stay big and successful, and they think they do that by basically being the only big and successful.
I mean, you've always had a lot of hot takes on a lot of different things. In fact, I know Will and I got to both see you at the Leaf House conference this past year. You did your 10 myths or mistakes, or
I think at that time I was talking about the 10 things that pissed me off, but yes.
You were, and it was entertaining.
It was very good, and many I agree with. But let's flip that a little bit and look at it more from the positive perspective. Will, what are whether it's just, I mean, I'm sure there's more than one, but if you could list one or two, where are the places we really need to think about? We need to focus. Where can we make a difference in the industry moving forward? Are there certain pockets and places we should think about?
I don't know. I feel like in some ways we've kind of talked about all of them. I do think there's a part of me that says, let's just categorize it by demographics. I do think that our nation suffers a little bit from trying to come up with a single solution for everybody. That's why the folks that hate the 401k, they tend to gravitate back towards something that looks a lot like an Uber Social Security, because the notion is that's a single program. The standards are applied, I don't know about equally, but they're consistently out there and kind of stuff. And that works. And, we should just do that. And we should not have all this innovation and stuff like that. But I think one of the great things about this industry, and it being a private industry, is that there is a lot of innovation going on and people are coming up with new and different things all the time. And I think people therefore have an opportunity to prepare for their retirement in ways that people never have. And I think that comes across in terms of getting people opportunities. So the first thing I think we all need to do is figure out a way to give everybody a chance to have access to one of these programs. I realize that's a legislative thing. I realize that's maybe even a regulatory thing. So it's like, how are we supposed to do that? There are, and I see a lot of innovation in this field. There is a lot of innovation out there about helping make it easier for employers to take on these plans and do something with them. You've got some legislative help in terms of tax credits and offsets. I think there are ways to make that better and easier kind of thing. But the mechanisms, I think, are already out there. And the players that are out there making it easier for really small businesses to sort of get into this and give people access, they're on your chart already. And so I think looking for ways to make it easier for people to step up and give their workers access to these programs, I think that's job one. Because once they get in, then there are a lot of other tools that are already there to help them develop and do it better and expand it and all that kind of thing. So that's kind of my sort of like where we need to focus first. And, and there can be other like PEPs, pool employer plans. There are a lot of designs. I think the Secure Acts, the two of them, gave us a lot of tools to play with.
Absolutely. I'm a huge proponent, as you know.
Well, and the other thing that I really like about even Secure 2.0 is that so many of the options that are there now, they're optional. So we're not like forcing big changes on people that they have to do something about. And I think that's good as well. But the front end of things is where I think we could all stand to do some help and whatever. And then obviously the other issue, and we've talked about this before, is the back end of this thing. How do you help people off ramp? And again, I've got some perspectives on some of those kind of things, but there are plenty of options out there now for people to take advantage of. What I'd like us to find as an industry is a better way to help people buy the one that's right for them, shop for it, if you will. Have established some kind of a marketplace, provide some sort of oversight, give institutional pricing to what really ends up being an individual decision. And Kelly Hewler's done great things over the years with her marketplace, but not everybody's got access to that kind of thing. But I think conceptually anyway, something like that. And even if it was a government database, I mean, I'm not big on government. I'm not big on big government stuff, but I think some kind of a database so people could acquire some financial income security, knowing that they weren't getting ripped off, would be helpful. And like I said, I'd like to make it easier for people to do the right things. I'd like to use tools to find it easier for them to pick the right things. I just would like them to be able to pick them, as opposed to we know Father knows best. Although Father might actually know best, and that's the other problem. But that kind of thing, I think, in the middle, there's pretty amazing things going on. You look at the recent discussions about, the private markets that we talked about earlier, whether those should be coming in or not, whether they should be coming in or not, there's going to be a planned fiduciary making that decision. And being, the other great thing that I love about the way our system is structured now is that you've got government oversight, and you've got the plaintiff's bar. I don't know, always keeping us honest, but keeping us on our toes anyway. But you've always got that intervention of that planned fiduciary and or the people that work with them in a similar capacity to kind of help make sure that you keep the fox out of the hen house. And so in the middle, it's not perfect. And sometimes, there are problems, and some people don't do a good job, and some people don't understand what their good job is. But I think there's a lot of opportunity there, and it provides opportunity both for oversight and protection, but also innovation. Because as long as you've got the private markets involved in this kind of stuff, employers are going to be looking for ways to stand out with regard to their status as an employer. And I think your benefit packages remain a big part of that. And I think the tools that we're talking about that help make it possible to deliver those benefits are an integral part of it. So I like the middle. I think we should do more on the front and the back. And the middle's constantly changing, but it seems to me it's changing in good ways.
When Lisa and I started our discussion, it was at NAPA 2024 that spawned this whole idea of what innovation is actually happening. And as we thought about who should go on the map because it's making the industry better, there were 4 persistent challenges, and you just discussed them. One was, how do we just create access so more employers and more employees can be involved? If they have the opportunity for a plan, how do you get them to participate? If they're in the plan, how do you boost that engagement as it shifts and things happen to them in their lives? And on the back end, how do you improve the outcomes that they receive? So you spoke to that. I actually think that a lot of the industry does seem to focus on the middle because that's what's really in front of us. But we need to connect those 4 pieces. And I wonder if you have any sort of closing comment about how to connect those 4 pieces so that the industry actually grows instead of sort of keeps trading plans back and forth.
Well, that's a great point. You all have heard said before, the whole industry seems to be chasing around the same 60,000 plans. And there's a simple answer for why, because that's where the money is. That's just as simple as it could be. It is, it's hard to make money at the small end of the market or at the early, people coming in new. It's hard to make money there, to be profitable there. And on the back end, it's hard to be profitable if the money isn't staying in your pocket. And I think a lot of our industry development has been about, so how do we keep the money that that we've worked so hard to help people build up? And I think that has staved off, if you will, some of the interest in what I think are truly effective and needed solutions at the back end, because it would mean the industry pockets giving it up. And I understand from a rational standpoint why you wouldn't want to do that. So I don't have any easy solution for that, because ultimately capitalism is going to be driven by profit and by how do we make the money and things like that. And I think that's going to be important. I think the opportunity is for people, as I think some do, to recognize that there's money to be made along the continuum, and there's money to be made by helping plans come in. The PEP development is a classic case of a way to take a group of small plans and create a really big plan, if you will, which makes it easier for the small employers who don't have a lot of time to deal with this stuff, but also makes it possible for it to be profitable for an entity who wants to run those programs and plans. On the outside of this thing, I mean, there are plenty of the providers who are out there now. They're in the IRA business, but can't we do something more innovative with our IRAs than just sit there and wait for people to be taking their RMDs, their required minimum distribution? Because that's what happens now. The people who don't sort of buy an annuity that provides the automatic income out, they just wait for the IRS to tell them how much it is, how much they get to live on this year. And we all know that's crazy. But in the absence of somebody who's actually able to help you feel comfortable about taking out your money and spending it, what else are people going to do? So I think there's an opportunity for the people who are making money in the middle to realize that just like the farm system in baseball, right? There's a feeder system here, and yes. How do you kind of bring those in, and how do you make those kind of plans profitable and things like that? But also understand that when it's time for the old players to retire, there are ways to sort of help them with that as well. And I think be more creative about how we do that, how we help people feel able and comfortable to spend the money that they have spent so much time and effort saving. And I don't think we've done that yet,
No.
but there are plenty of smart people, and there's surely a lot of opportunity. I think we're now up to 12,000 people a day retiring. People keep talking 10,000 because it's an easy number, but I think we're up to 12. And with that many people every single day going into retirement of some form or other, many who, by the way, like me, have retired, but it just means I'm not getting a paycheck, but I've still got money coming in, and I've still got money to invest and money to take out. And so a lot of opportunity to help those people as well.
Yeah, the accumulation part was the easy part.
Well, it didn't feel like it at the time, but yeah.
Yeah, I know it doesn't, but on a relative basis. But to your point about it being, being really tough to have margin in the small market, when you look at our map on the record keeper / operations neighborhood, as we call it, or category, and then also small business solutions, there are companies there who are figuring that out and who are using a modern tech stack along with other, new business model ideas, and they are finding a way to make it profitable. Because as we all know, 9 out of 10 employers today still aren't offering a 401k plan. So there are leaders doing that or trying to make a difference there. So hopefully we're going to see a lot more progress in that area, because I know all three of us sitting here, expanding access is a big important part to us of this whole thing. So getting more people into the system. Before we go, Nevin, you've really been such a voice in our industry for decades now, really. You've a trusted voice, not just a voice, and you've had a lot of insights and clarity. And I would say you even have helped shape the conversations that we've had in our industry. And I know I've learned a lot from you over the years. Sometimes you've really helped me to see something from a little bit different perspective. And I think even some of our conversations around PEPs and other things, I mean, you've just always been kind of that voice and that for me. But as you are at this stage and I know we're not you're not retired per se, but at this point in your career, what do you hope that your contributions have helped shape or shift in our industry?
Things like, I mean, first of all, people like you, Lisa, saying such nice things about me because of the things you've done and the things you'll continue to do that I think really matter. I mean, I look around. There have been people that I run into now who will talk about something that I said or wrote like long, long, long ago, and I've forgotten about it, but it had an impact. And so, I tell people I spent the first 20 years of my career in this business doing things that mattered, but nobody. I mean, I call it toiling in obscurity. All right. Because like a lot of people in our business, I was working and working hard and doing good things, but it was a plan at a time or participant at a time. And it didn't really sort of matter to anything. And then I got this wonderful opportunity open to me to basically, I don't know, stick my neck out there every day and try to make sense of what was going on. I just love the feeling that I've made a difference. One of the things I hated about moving into the role, even at plan sponsor, was you lose that personal touch. You not dealing directly anymore with a plan sponsor who's done a plan design and their enrollments, their participation gone up 20%. You're not talking to a participant who now is able to like hug you and say, "Oh, thank goodness, for what you told me, 5 years ago, you made it all possible," that kind of thing. You lose that on a personal level. But for me, to be able to just hear from people like you and Will who have sort of taken something that I've said or shared or whatever and been able to do that, there's like a magnifier effect. And when I look at how this industry has grown and all the innovation that's taken place, I will not take credit for that. But if I've had any role in sort of helping that be more successful, if I played any role in keeping people from getting away with saying the 401k sucks, if I have done anything to sort of help people think differently about things they've taken for granted, then man, that's more than I could have asked for. It's more than I ever aspired to. I've been lucky, and I've been fortunate to have plenty of people looking over my shoulder, correcting me when I'm wrong, but also just giving me the opportunity to express those opinions, because a lot of them, that's just what they are. I'm just a person. I'm learning all the time. And I am learning all the time in this business. And why I'm still in this business is because there's something to learn all the time. It never gets old. It never gets stagnant. And it keeps you jumping. But more importantly, what we do matters to people's lives. And, this is a conversation I have with people who are doing recruiting these days for our business. We don't talk enough about that. We talk about the money and all that kind of thing, but we don't talk about the impact that we have on people's lives, on real, regular, moderate income people out there who are slugging it away, doing everything they can to prepare for their lives, for their families, and for their future. And they're able to do it because of us, because of what we do. So you know what? Just being able to be a part of that and riding on the coattails of other people, I'm thrilled. And if I've made a positive impact on any things I cited before, I'm just grateful.
I have one question to turn it around a little bit, because you really have made a big impact. And what's the kindest thing that anyone's ever done for you?
The kindest thing, aside from the occasional comments like I've just referred to, and like even what Lisa just said, that just kind of make me want to melt. There are two individuals in my life that really kind of stand out. One of them, and I've talked about him before, is Charlie Ruffle, who founded Plan Sponsor and set all that up. Why? Because he took, I had never done any of this writing for a living, and I was doing a little informal email to kind of help people that I worked with have a better idea about what was going on. Charlie had the vision to see that. It was News Dash, literally. I called it News Dash, and to bring it to bear and to allow that kind of communication to be distributed throughout our industry. And if Charlie Ruffle didn't have that vision and didn't provide that opportunity, You would not, I promise you, have any idea who Nevin Adams is, nor would you care. So I got to give a shout out to Charlie.
Well, thanks to Charlie. Yes.
That's awesome. I read a million words afterwards.
That news dash is a part of my, I mean, that, yeah, I loved it.
I wanted to change it. When I came, I was sure that my cute little email, complete with, Friday files and on this day and all this stuff, would need to be changed, would need to be dressed up. And Charlie said no. Charlie, he's a visionary, and he still is a visionary. And I owe everything to Charlie. And the only other boss that I would mention is somebody you all won't know about, but he was a boss in my banking career, a guy by the name of Doug Hartzema. And at a point in my career when I felt like some big doors had been closed pretty firmly in my face, with my toe still in it, by the way, Doug Hartzema gave me the opportunity and the confidence to write. I had no background, no training. I was a business undergrad. I didn't have anything to do with, and then law school. I had no writing training. But Doug gave me an opportunity and the support and the confidence to feel comfortable doing that kind of thing. And it was on an internal basis, granted. But other than that, at a time when I sort of thought the things that I was destined to do were not going to happen, he opened another door. And that's what led to the News Dash. And that's what led me to Charlie Ruffle. And so I don't know. Doug probably wouldn't say it was kind on his part. Doug would say he was just acknowledging what was there. But that's what made Doug such a great boss, mentor at a critical time in my life. So,
and just great examples of recognizing people for what they can contribute and what they can do, and giving them that hand, extending that reach, or sort of reaching back and pulling forward, which is a great thing. And I think your background as an attorney and the way that law school and being an attorney teaches you to think, and then your writing capabilities, I think all that together is really what has made you so good at this. And in your career, I think you have really, really given folks, your thinking has caused others to think and really look at it and consider it from different perspectives. Even though sometimes you give the answers or you give what you think, I think your best gift is causing people to think more. And I think that's a great thing. So
appreciate it. I appreciate what you guys are doing. You all are an inspiration to me. And I really appreciate the opportunity to hang out with you guys again.
It was fun doing it. I was just saying, it was fun doing it. It was great to sort of mix this up with you and put it all together. And it's kind of really fun how it all tied together in the end, because the industry wouldn't have your knowledge and your writing if it wasn't for the two people you called out, Doug and Charlie. So thanks for sharing that with us.
And to remind everyone that the work that we do is really important and meaningful. And we need to remember that. So thanks for, what a great way to tie it up all here at the end. We can't thank you enough for being one of our early guests. So thank you, Nevin. And thank you all for joining us today on this episode of Decoding Growth. Be willing to go in there and subscribe, like, share, please, and come back, and we'll see you again on the next episode. Thanks.
Decoding Growth isn't just talk. It's insight, action, and shared wisdom. If today's episode resonated with you, share your insights and join the conversation. Subscribe, rate, review, and spread the word. Thanks for listening. See you next time.